Welcome to the history of the Museum of Antiques. This is the story of the long partnership between the Moses Greeley Parker Library and the Drake Historical Society. First, let's set the timeline. It is the year 1900. Drake is preparing to celebrate its 200th anniversary. At the town meeting, citizens voted to accept the provisions of Chapter 347, Acts of 1890, and make an appropriation to establish a free public library. But where to put the new library? Schoolhouse number 7, also known as the original center school, became vacant when the students were moved to a larger building. At the town meeting, citizens approved Article 26 to build a second floor over a portion of the old schoolhouse. The enlarged school was to be used for town offices and the new library. The new library opened on December 8th of 1900. This is a painting of the new second floor in the old schoolhouse that became the town library. The upper room was provided with shelves and bookcases, and books were purchased and donated. The cloakroom was made into a reference room for general circulation. The lower floor had been arranged for town offices. The new library was well received. This is the portrait of Rose Estelle Peabody. It was Rose who invited residents of Drake to display family relics and curios at a makeshift museum set up at the library. The townspeople started bringing in their rock collections, their seashell collections, and many Native American tools and weapons they had found in their own backyard. People brought in old kitchen gadgets, farm tools, family records, Bibles, and scrapbooks. Records were kept of each item so that it could be returned to the owner. The portrait of Dr. Israel Hildreth was a prize donation. Israel Hildreth attended a full course of medical lectures in Boston and studied under 2 local doctors to be awarded his license to practice medicine and surgery in 1815. He practiced his profession as a doctor in Drake and surrounding towns and was a staff officer in the volunteer Middlesex militia. Israel also served as the town surveyor, justice of the peace, and was on the school committee. He served several terms as the hog catcher and fish warden, but requested to be excused as fish warden because there were no longer any fish in the Merrimack River. This portrait was donated by Colonel Butler Ames, son of Albert Ames, and Blanche Butler, and great-grandson of Israel Hildreth. Currently, the Hildreth portrait is on display in the stairwell of the town hall. Everyone loves maps. These were very old and hand-drawn. Without a copy machine, maps were simply traced by hand. Many were plot maps that had been passed down for generations. This is a copy of the first map of Drake. It was made on March 26, 1702, or 1 month after the town of Drake was incorporated. In this map, the Drake border goes into New Hampshire as far north as Canobie Lake. Interesting items were also submitted for exhibition. This is a strange anomaly of pine cones found in East Drake, donated by Mrs. George D. Coburn. An extraordinary collection of birds and mammals were put on display. These were made by Frederick A. Keyes. Frederick was a native of Pelham who married Mary Jane Coburn of Draycott in 1880. This is about the same time that taxidermy became a popular craft in the Northeast. For the next 20 years, Fred, a farmer by trade, took up the act of turning foul and furry friends into lifelong statues. These animals are laced with arsenic, once the main ingredient for taxidermy. Symptoms of long-term arsenic poisoning can include pain, severe digestive problems, vomiting, blood in the urine, metallic taste in the mouth, salivating, hair loss, cancer, convulsions, and confusion. In 1900, he committed suicide. Frederick was only 47 years old. Lots and lots of farm equipment was brought in. This is a bog shoe that was attached to a horse's hoof and supported him in wet meadows. This pair of bog shoes was donated by Mrs. Edwin Johnson on Marsh Hill Road. This cranberry rake was donated by Mrs. Levi Parker and was used in the wet meadows west of the old rifle range off of Bridge Street. This desk was made in 1781 by Stephen Russell as a wedding gift to his daughter Abigail, who married Simeon Coburn. Early American furniture was simple, practical, and utilitarian. Fathers often made dressers and tables as wedding gifts for their daughters. New fathers made cradles and rocking chairs. This clarinet was played by James H. Currier in the military band of Pelham, New Hampshire in the 1830s. It was donated in 1922 by his son Edwin M. Currier, who lived in Draycott and left many prized items at the Library Museum. He was the great-great-grandson of Captain Stephen Russell and also donated the desk in the previous slide. Edwin was the last member in this branch of the Curriers. In 1922, Mary Greeley Morrison brought forth a proposal to the town of Draycott that she would donate land on Arlington Street that had been her family for generations and the necessary money to build a library with the condition that the library be named after her brother Moses Greeley Parker. Moses had dreamed of building a library for his beloved Draycott, but passed away before his dream was fulfilled. His sister Mary put his dream into motion, but alas, she died on October 17th of 1922. The project was then overseen by Mary and Moses' stepbrother's son, Theodore. On November 23rd of 1923, the library was officially presented to the town. The completion of this project is what we are celebrating this year as the 100th anniversary of the Moses Greeley Parker Library. But what about the Museum of Antiques? It was left behind and forgotten. Enter John Alfred Bailey. Mr. Bailey, a member of the Lowell Historical Society, recently became a Draycott resident. He discovered the treasure trove of Draycott's history in the town hall and adopted it. He cataloged all of the items that no one ever came back to retrieve. He was able to rally the support of the town to make the Museum of Antiques a separate entity from the library. This portrait of John Alfred Bailey was painted by Betty Baroni in 1989. The transition of the collection from the library to the Drake Historical Society was made official at the town meeting on February 11th of 1928. Article 60 relinquished all of the antiques and curios in the upper room of the town office building, formerly occupied by the library, to the new Drake Historical Society. Article 61 gave the society $200 to improve their room on the upper floor of the town office building for the Museum of Antiques. John Bailey was elected as the first president. With the awakening of the museum, Drake residents started bringing in antiques again. This is a portrait of Daniel Gage that was donated by his daughter Martina in 1931. Daniel Gage kept the refrigerators from Pelham to Westford cold with a block of ice cut from the Merrimack River or one of a multitude of lakes in which he owned property along the shoreline. Daniel's crew used these ice tongs to deliver a large block of ice directly into the ice box in your kitchen. Daniel's family was one of the first proprietors of Ipswich, at the same time as Samuel Varnum and Richard Shatswell, the first settlers of Drake. Edward Coburn was also from Ipswich and worked for the Saltonstall family. A little known fact. After Daniel's unexpected death, his daughter Martina took over all of the operations her father had once managed. She was in charge of nearly 400 ice cutters and 100 delivery men. She ended up running the business nearly as long as her father had. And another little known fact, Daniel also ran a lumber business that Martina also took over. As Drake grew, the need for a larger town office became necessary. With the help of WPA funds, the town hall expanded with 2 wings for more offices and an assembly hall and legion rooms on the second floor. So, in 1939, once again, the little Museum of Antiques, that isn't so little anymore, is in the spotlight again. All of the artifacts from the upper room of the town office are moved into the basement of the Moses Greenlee Parker Library. After 16 years apart, the library and the museum are back together again. The first meeting in the new historical room in the basement of the Moses Greenlee Parker Library was held on May 1st of 1939. This beautiful sturdy door came from the Drake Garrison House on Riverside Street. It became the door to the historical room, housing the Museum of Antiques in the basement of the library. This door is now in the basement of the Drake Historical Society Museum. This is a photograph of Dr. Moses Greeley Parker, who was then the President General of the National Society of the Sons of the American Revolution. He was invited by Mrs. Matthew T. Scott to stand with her and President Howard Taft as he welcomed the delegates of the 21st Continental Congress Daughters of the American Revolution in Washington, D.C. in 1912. This was a gift from the Parker estate donated by Mrs. Theodore E. Parker, wife of Moses' nephew. In 1951, there was a flood in the basement of the library. Many artifacts and documents from the Museum of Antiques were ruined. Guess what this is? It's a bone dish. Bone dishes were popular from the 19th century to the 1920s. They were used as a place to put chicken bones and fish bones. Now, these meats are commonly sold and prepared as boneless. There was another flood in the basement in 1962. Again, more of the precious collection was destroyed. Guess what this is? It's a shaving mug. This lovely shell pattern cup is accented with gold dots. Warm water goes in the lower bowl, and a shaving puck is placed in the upper bowl. Wet the shaving brush in the lower bowl, then rub it on the puck to make a lather. This was donated by Mary Dinley Howard of Lakeview Avenue in 1967. In 1963, Drake Historical Society President James Kiernan came up with the idea to turn the Oliver J. Coburn House into a museum. The house, owned by the town, was put on a 99-year lease to the Historical Society. The Drake Historical Society incorporated itself to cover the legality of the lease. It took almost 3 years to transform the shabby, vandalized, abandoned farmhouse into a museum. The grand gala opening of the museum was held in October 1965. One of the first things put on display was all of those maps. They were hung in a room that was called the Mapaporium. The first significant donation made in the new home of the Drake Historical Society was this 19th century reed organ donated by the Old Yellow Meeting House. Since opening the new museum house, we have received lots of new items to add to our collection. We now have a modern-day butter maker, a different sad iron for every wrinkle and pleat, a state-of-the-art oven with a 4-burner stove, a contemporary washing machine, a very stylish indoor toilet, and a futuristic faucet and sink. In 1988, a large room was added to the house. This gave the museum a much-needed large room for meetings. This room was decorated to highlight Drake's most famous citizen, Speaker of the House, General Joseph Bradley Varnum. This addition was privately funded and spearheaded by Harvey J. Gagnon. In 1994, the historic Harmony Hall building was moved from the Collinsville section of Drake to the Drake Historical Society complex. This huge project was also spearheaded by Harvey J. Gagnon. And with the new Harmony Hall, we were able to add a few of those newfangled automobiles. This is the Drake Historical Complex today. We have 20 rooms of antiques and vintage items, all pertaining to Drake history. We have 4 basements full of farm equipment, carriages, and stored artifacts. We are constantly circulating our displays and highlighting different items, and we receive new items all the time. If you visited here before, it's not the same now, so stop by your Drake Museum often and see your history come to life. Open every Sunday from 1 to 3. There is no admission charge. We are always free. Happy 100th anniversary to the Moses Greeley Parker Library.